going on? No horsing around family. Zach Boy back at it again with a little bit of the latest news. Lamar Jackson talk. I've said it a million times. The voice is larger than life. We have to have Derek Larger on here. Derek, how you been, my man?
I've been doing well, dude. How about you?
Not too bad. So I thought we'd hop in on this Lamar Jackson topic. Interesting subject, if nothing else. Great to debate. Great to kind of think pros and cons. So I thought we would go pros and cons. Just your initial thoughts on the pros side of maybe bringing potentially a Lamar Jackson to Indianapolis. Is there any value there for you, or are you just kind of out on that? Just curious your thoughts.
Well, obviously, the biggest pro to bringing Lamar Jackson in is you basically know over the next few years, you're a team that immediately is in contention. I mean, there's no other way to deny it that if you brought Lamar in on this football team right now, this football team is a playoff team next year. It is. It's got Lamar Jackson. He's one of the premier best athletes and best players out there at the position and quarterbacking. He's gotten much better at it as time has gone along, and he has become a really great player. And you have some pieces around him that, even though is still developing, there's a lot of guys, especially with Jonathan Taylor, that can just absolutely terrify a defense if you had Lamar and Jonathan Taylor in the same backfield. That is very concerning. So obviously when you look at it from that perspective, you know, in the short term that Lamar Jackson immediately increases your odds of going and winning a chip. Just at the end of the day, how long does that window stay open? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I might worry a little bit about his body being able to hold up. The last 2 seasons, it's broken down towards the end of the season when you really need your quarterback the most, right? Postseason, that's why you have a Lamar Jackson. Do you have any concern with just his body, with his body being able to hold up through the duration of, let's just say it's a 5-year deal from whomever signs him? Do you have any concern that this guy might not even make it to year 5 before his body just completely gives out on him because he takes so many hits in an NFL season?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I would say this, I talked with my buddy who was telling me that exact same thing before everyone else started bringing up this idea of Lamar's health. He said it, that quarterbacks that play like Lamar Jackson, they just don't last. I mean, you even saw what happened with Cam Newton. I mean, Cam Newton's body wore down as time went along. Now, granted, he's a little bit bigger than what Lamar Jackson is, but I mean, again, Lamar might be smarter. Lamar might be more athletic, but at the end of the day, you know, getting to be that kind of playing field, it does wear you down over time, and it's already happening now. And you question, you know, whether or not that's going to be a prime thing. And that's why I think a lot of people, a lot of owners and GMs and other teams were so quick to say, we don't want him, because you have to commit to that player full time for the next however many years he plays. And there's a ton of people that have the same opinion as what my friend did, that his body over the next 3-4 years is not going to hold up, and he's just not going to be the same player anymore. It's an unfortunate aspect where, you know, everyone's saying these teams are allergic to winning. Just some teams just don't want to take on the possibility you have to pay him the second highest contract in the history of the NFL and know that he may not last another 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I'm probably on that side too, Derek, if I'm being honest. I don't know that we cannot question that he's a special football player. Like, that's unquestioned. I mean, he's done a 100%. Great job at what he's done. I mean, obviously he won the MVP. He's had, the stats to back all of that up, the best running quarterback that we've ever really seen. But when you think about the long-term situation and the flexibility of the football team, just kind of trying to wrap my head around the fact, what would it even take to bring a Lamar Jackson in here, right? Like who? Somebody's got to go. If you're going to bring Lamar in there, you have to have the cap space to be able to accommodate that. Are you good with the idea before we kind of get into the con side of it, of just knowing that you're going to have to get rid of some really star players. Maybe a DeForest Buckner has to go, to just free up that cap space to be able to get to that $50 million per year to be able to pay them. Is the payoff worth it is what I guess I'm getting to. Is it worth it to bring this quarterback in here? But on the other end, I'm going to have to probably get rid of 2-3 really good football players to free up that cap space.
Well, I mean, it's worth it if you feel confident in your ability to build a good enough roster with the cap space you have left to be able to do such a thing. I mean, we kind of already talked about it. Like, I mean, Zach, it's obvious that the Colts are looking to potentially trade a few more veterans on this roster already because of cap situations and guys getting older. And, it's not necessarily a rebuild right now for Indianapolis, but they are cleaning house of a few players that they don't think is going to be equivalent to the importance of this franchise moving forward with this new quarterback that they're going to be eventually bringing in. And I mean, the problem is like you said, when it comes to Lamar, I mean, what you have to give up. And then on top of it, this team is already looking to get rid of guys. Why just make it even harder now to bring more guys in with the cap situation that you're already in? And who knows if it's going to end up working out for you. You're already getting rid of guys because you're anticipating that your team is not ready for the next step. And if you're already not ready and you're bringing in this quarterback, which is already going to hinder your ability to bring in any more guys, yeah, it may help you immediately with making your team better. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to build that roster somehow. And there's some guys with some contracts that are coming up that you need to have brought around and that sort of thing. So it's difficult. If you're Chris Ballard and you're thinking, I know I can do it, then that's fine. But at the end of the day, I mean, that one contract that you give Lamar, man, it's gotta be worth it in the end. And I don't know if Ballard wants to take on that risk.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting at the very least, but you think that Chris Ballard would have to kick the tires. I know there's been a few reports that come out and said the Colts have at least, inquired about the idea. I don't have a problem with the trade compensation, the 2 first-round picks. Like, if you're going to get a star quarterback, I mean,
right.
I'm fine to give up the 2. My question for you, Derek, would be, you can go a younger route, and we don't know because there is an unknown, but you could potentially get an Anthony Richardson who would provide you a lot of the same things that Lamar Jackson would provide you on a rookie deal. Like, that would be my one hang up right there. If I'm going through it and we're just kind of, on the back end and that brain trust is having that conversation, might make a little more sense to have an opportunity and a chance to get an Anthony Richardson, who is just, I mean, by all intents and purposes, broke every metric that you could break, for a quarterback when it comes to just an athletic standpoint in the combine. If you're Chris Ballard and you got to choose between those 2 guys, Anthony Richardson, which is obviously a rookie, a guy you're going to have to develop, that accuracy is simply not there, but you get him on a rookie deal, or you got an opportunity with Lamar Jackson staring right at your face. Which direction are you going if you're the GM? And we're talking about our current constructed roster right now as we're recording this today. What's the decision for you if you got to go in one direction or the other?
I'm going with the Anthony Richardson route. I am, because I know that, again, obviously, from the standpoint of if Lamar Jackson came back fully healthy and you knew for a fact that this guy didn't have health issues, then there would be no question I would do that, because then, through that next 5-year window that you got, like, okay, we're just going to try and build this roster. We know Lamar can do this. And if we just build enough around him, then we're going to win this thing. We know we got the best shot at doing it. And I know there's a lot of fans out there, Zach, that'll tell people it is not worth losing 5 to 10 years off your franchise to win 1 Super Bowl. That's a load of crap. There's a dozen teams in the NFL right now that would kill and do anything. They'd ruin their franchise to go and get 1 Super Bowl win that puts you on top of the world of the biggest sports broadcast in America. Like, that's what it's about. It's about winning the big deal. And if you do that, then it doesn't matter how many years after that ruins your franchise. That's what it's about, is getting to the big dance and winning. That's what the only thing that people care about. And obviously Lamar would be in the best situation to do that at this moment. But I think if Lamar ends up breaking something worse and his athleticism goes down by year 3 and he's, relying on just that, I'm thinking, okay, so if I don't win the Super Bowl within the next 2 years, I'm not confident in Lamar to take me even further. So I would just rather say, for Anthony Richardson, who is bigger than Lamar, he's just as athletic as Lamar. He's a guy that you're going to continue to build on his throwing as a player. And not to mention the fact he's only going to be 21 years old by the time he gets into the league. I mean, he is 5 years younger. He's got less wear and tear on his body. I know that Shane Steichen can come in and build around him and try to form him into the kind of player that we want. If you're Lamar, you have to form. The problem is also, and people aren't taking this into consideration, if Lamar comes to the Colts, you have to frame your system around Lamar Jackson. Yeah. It's not this. And obviously Shane Steichen has said it. We're not going to form a system to where I form the system and the quarterback has to figure it out. Obviously that implies that, but with Lamar, you now have to run things a certain way. You can't just ignore his athletic ability by, pretending to have him throw 35 times a game. It's just not sustainable for Lamar Jackson to do that, because his biggest strength is his ability to move out of the pocket. And that's something to where, you have to change your offense around that. And that may not be what Shane Steichen wants to actually do. And it might contradict, some of the things that he likes doing. I mean, yeah, he's dealt with mobile quarterbacks in the past, but nothing like Lamar Jackson. So who's to say that Shane Steichen can actually cater to the needs of Lamar Jackson while also contributing to his long-term success of keeping him healthy? I mean, that's a hard thing to do. So just a lot of ifs going around Lamar Jackson right now. So if you're asking me to do it, I'm going with the young guy.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with you, Derek. You made a great point. You trade, you get a Super Bowl, and then maybe it does take 2 or 3 years to get back. I'd have to think that the Rams don't give one iota of a care of how things worked out with that Matt Stafford trade. They got what they wanted, and now they have to shed some cap salary space and make a little bit of room and possibly do a little bit of a retool or a rebuild, and they're fine by doing that. If they had a chance to do that, any general manager would have done that 10 out of 10 times to get that Super Bowl. I just worry a little bit about when you talk about Richardson going into the draft. It would be shocking to me that he would be a Ballard Steichen guy, because it would go against everything that they've said pre and post combine, right? They said accuracy was such a big deal. Now, obviously you can coach accuracy. You can get a guy who would be a little bit more accurate, but I don't know that you're ever going to get to the level with an Anthony Richardson that he's going to be, an extremely precise, accurate quarterback. So that would have to scare me a little bit. Switch over to Will Levis a little bit at number 4. If you're sitting there at number 4 and the board falls kind of how you feel like it's going to fall, you're going to be C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Anderson. If the Cardinals don't trade, they got a choice between Richardson and they got a choice between Will Levis. Who's Derek Larger taking? Are you going to take them? Are you going to be tempted by the trade back? Because you hear a lot of Hendon Hooker crap that comes out here, here recently. Are you just going to pull the plug and say, okay, I'm going to pick between these two guys and we're going to move forward. We're going to build our team around one of these guys. And that's it. We're going to solve this long-term quarterback solution once and for all.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is I've seen a good chunk of Colts Nation say trade back and just suck next year and just be like, here's the thing. I would never ask my team to suck for a year to go and try and get the best player available at another time. I'm not doing it. So I'm tired of the just suck next year and go get someone else. I mean, you clearly are not a great fan if you're choosing to have your team suck. We saw a lot of that last year.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, unless there was like the last few weeks of the season when we clearly saw there was nothing going in our direction, then everyone wanted to suck. And it's kind of where it was, because at that point you had no other choice. But to just trade back and hope that someone at some point is going to be able to take over for that, I just don't see the point in it. So if I'm the Colts, you absolutely are trying to find the quarterback that is going to set you apart. Now, of course, if they deem that Anthony Richardson is not, or Will Levis can't get it done, then of course we learned that. We learned that obviously they don't trust Anthony Richardson or Will Levis at that point to do it, although I highly doubt that that's the case. So between the two of them, though, I'm 100% taking Richardson or Levis versus, trading back, acquiring maybe a few more picks, and then and getting some random that I know is not going to lead this team to the promised land in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, because you've got to have a guy, Derek, even if you're just projecting what's going to happen anyways, right? Like it's the fear of the unknown when you're drafting these guys. You've got to have a guy at a minimum that has the elite skills to get there to that point, right? Because that's all you're really coming up with when you're drafting a Josh Allen, a guy who's not been molded yet. You're drafting a guy when you see that potential, you see that projection of what he could be, floor versus ceiling, and you got to really think to yourself, here's an opportunity, and it may not have worked out exactly the way that Colts Nation wanted it to when we abruptly had that trade with Carolina. But you still got to walk away with a quarterback and build around them and make the best possible team that you can and have your long-term solution. Last question before we hop off here. That first pick's really going to shake things up. I think it's kind of assumed, and I would agree that they're going to select CJ Stroud. But if they were to take Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson with that first pick, that would really change the whole dynamic of this draft. Your thoughts just on the first pick with Carolina? They obviously traded up. I know there's this notion that they may be willing to trade back again. I don't think I fall into that. That's a lot to give up to go to number one to just trade right back, right? Like you probably would have tried to work out a deal with the number 3 team, and you could have kept a few of those assets. Number 1 pick, you think Frank Reich's going to march up there and take CJ Stroud, or you think it's not cut and dry at this point? You think they're really just kind of hashing it out and they're undecided?
Well, I don't know. Me personally, I mean, I would have said originally that the reason why Carolina is going up to number 1 is because there's one guy in particular that they want, but I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that they obviously wanted number 1 because they get their choice, but I don't think there's one guy specifically that they had that said we have to get this guy versus the others. But of course, trading up to number 1 is the best source of action to ensure that you get a chance to get a quarterback, because even if you get to number 3, there isn't a guy. You still need to determine whether or not that's going to happen. And of course, I think a lot of people are just thinking the same thing, right? Like all these different reports that Anthony Richardson truly is the number 1. I don't buy it. I think that CJ Stroud is still the number 1 quarterback in this whole draft class. And I think that's what the Carolina Panthers would end up doing. Truly, because, I mean, when you look at it from all things perspective, I think Frank Reich thinks that CJ Stroud is the closest thing to a Phillip Rivers and to a Carson Wentz that he has seen versus all the others, right? Bryce Young is extremely small. And then you're talking about Anthony Richardson, who's insanely raw. So unless Frank Reich thinks that he knows he can tap into the potential of an Anthony Richardson, which is possible, you don't know. But the Panthers have a situation where, I mean, if they don't get it right, then it could go down as one of the worst number 1 trades of all time. So I think they're going to go the smart route and they're going to go with Stroud, because I'll tell you this. I mean, the Texans, if the Panthers took Bryce Young, all mayhem's probably going to go loose when it comes to the Texans. I would assume they just go with CJ Stroud at that.
Stroud ain't going to the Texans.
But I don't know. I don't know because I mean, from what it sounds like is Houston wants Bryce Young for and would do anything to get Bryce Young. But we don't know if Carolina takes Bryce Young, then, who knows? Maybe they go with the higher upside and go Anthony Richardson with number 2 because they think that he's, got that mobility. And then Indianapolis can trade up to number 3 and go and get CJ Stroud. Just give up whatever you need to make sure that you get that quarterback. Although I highly doubt it. I'm seriously thinking that Stroud's going to end up being the number 1.
Yeah, I think I probably tend to agree. Feels very Frank Reich-ish, when it comes right down to it. I mean, but to be fair, he's probably the best version of what Frank's tried to do for the last couple of years, right? Like he actually is going to get a guy who is capable of doing what Frank's asking a quarterback to do on the football field. You're going to get a hell of a football player. I've said all along, if you get CJ Stroud, if you get Bryce Young in this draft, you're getting a pretty good football player. It's just about putting it together and putting the right pieces around them to make that work. And it seems like the Panthers are committed to Frank Reich and what he's wanting and what he's asking for as far as coaching staff, as far as players and compensation and all that good stuff. So it should be interesting. But, guys, we want to know what you think. Hit us up in the comments. Lamar Jackson, yes, no, maybe so. And if you haven't joined this No Horsing Around family, we encourage you to do that. And when you get done listening to this, hop on over to the Bring the Juice pod. Listen to Derek. Hey, Derek, by the way, before you go over here, I want to get a chance to plug. You got your own thing going, too. Are you still doing kind of your solo, just your little side project, or where are you at with that?
Yeah. Me and my buddy are also doing a regular NFL podcast, and that's on YouTube. It's called the Chasing Larger Sports Stories podcast. So you guys can always go and check that out. But yeah, main priority is Bring the Juice on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
There you go, man. Well, guys, until next time, keep it coming, keep the comments flowing, and keep the conversation going. Go Colts.